The coffee cup sat exactly where he'd left it Tuesday morning, half full, cold, with that faint ring of cream settled at the bottom like sediment in a forgotten pond. It was Friday now, 3 days since Robert walked out of our kitchen in his gray suit and burgundy tie, saying he had meetings all day and might be late. 3 days since I'd heard his voice, felt his presence, or had any proof that my husband of 32 years still existed in this world. I'm 63 years old, and I thought I knew what loneliness felt like. I'd raised 2 children, mostly alone, while Robert built his consulting business, traveled for work, came home exhausted with nothing left to give except polite conversation and the occasional Saturday morning where we'd read the paper in companionable silence. But this absence that filled every room of our house like a presence, this was different. This was the kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your chest until you can't quite breathe right. The police weren't interested. Adults have the right to leave, the board officer told me when I called Thursday afternoon, panic finally overtaking my stubborn belief that Robert would walk through the door with some reasonable explanation. Has he taken clothes? Money? Does he have a history of mental illness or substance abuse? No. Just gone, like smoke, like he'd never been real at all. I'm telling you this because what I found out, where Robert really was those 3 days, it changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 decades. And by the time I discovered the truth, it was too late to do anything except choose, stay silent and protect the life I'd built, or burn it all down and take him with me. I chose fire. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really began. Not Tuesday when he left, but 6 months earlier when I first noticed the wedding ring sitting on his nightstand. My name is Eleanor Hartley, and I've spent most of my adult life being reasonable. Reasonable about Robert's travel schedule that kept him away 40 weeks a year. Reasonable about the way our intimacy had faded into something polite and scheduled, like dental appointments. Reasonable about the fact that at 63, invisible seemed to be my permanent state, to store clerks who looked through me, to my adult children who called dutifully but briefly, to my husband who kissed me on the forehead the way you'd pat a reliable dog. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Connecticut, the kind of house that screams successful but not ostentatious. White siding, black shutters, a maple tree in the front yard that turned gorgeous gold every October and dropped leaves I spent weekends raking. Robert's home office took up the entire converted attic, a sanctuary I rarely entered. My domain was the kitchen, where I cooked meals he ate while reading his phone, and the garden, where I grew tomatoes no one but me seemed to appreciate. The wedding ring first appeared on his nightstand on a Tuesday in April. I noticed it when I was putting away laundry. His side of the dresser still organized the way he liked it, socks rolled, not folded, undershirts stacked by color, even though they were all white. The ring sat there, catching afternoon light, and I stared at it for a full minute before my brain processed what I was seeing. Robert never took off his wedding ring. In 32 years, I'd seen him remove it exactly twice. Once for an MRI, once when it got stuck and we had to use soap and ice to work it off his swollen knuckle. The ring was part of him, like his watch or his reading glasses. Seeing it abandoned on the nightstand felt wrong, felt significant, but I couldn't articulate why. I picked it up, felt the weight of it, solid gold, slightly worn on the inside from decades of wear. Inside, our wedding date was still visible, June 15th, 1993. I'd been 31, Robert 34. We'd gotten married in my parents' backyard, a small ceremony with maybe 40 guests, and I'd been so sure, so completely certain that this serious man with kind eyes was going to be my forever. I put the ring back exactly where I'd found it, and didn't mention it that evening when Robert came home. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe it had been bothering him, chafing. Maybe he'd been trying it on to see if it needed resizing. Maybe. but the ring stayed on the nightstand. Days turned into weeks. I watched it sit there, accumulating a faint layer of dust, like everything else in our bedroom that didn't get used anymore. The decorative pillows, the novels on his nightstand, our marriage. In May, I noticed other things, small things that individually meant nothing, but together formed a pattern I couldn't quite ignore. Robert showering at odd times, midday on weekends, immediately after coming home from work, sometimes twice in an evening. New cologne, subtle but definitely different from the woody scent he'd worn for years. A distraction in his eyes when I spoke to him, like he was having a completely separate conversation in his head. And his phone, always with him now, even when he went to the bathroom, always face down on the table during meals, always password protected, even though for years we'd known each other's codes, had that easy access that comes with trust and decades of shared life. I could have confronted him, should have, probably, but I was afraid. Not of anger or confrontation. Robert wasn't volatile, wasn't the type to rage or threaten. I was afraid of confirmation, afraid that asking the question would force an answer I wasn't ready to hear. So I stayed reasonable. I told myself I was being paranoid. I blamed it on menopause, aging, the natural paranoia of being a woman whose society had decided was past relevance. Then came Tuesday, October 8th, the day Robert disappeared. He came down to breakfast at 7, as always. I'd made eggs and toast, as always. We ate in our usual silence, him scrolling through news on his phone, me pretending to read the paper, but really watching him, trying to read his face for clues about what was happening inside his head. "I have meetings all day," he said, finishing his coffee. "Okay," I said. The same response I'd been giving for 32 years. He kissed my forehead, that perfunctory gesture that had replaced actual intimacy somewhere in our 40s, and left. I watched him get into his silver BMW, back out of the driveway, disappear around the corner. I washed the dishes. I watered the garden. I went to book club, where we discussed a thriller about a wife who discovers her husband's secret life, and I smiled and said it was unrealistic, that real marriages weren't that dramatic. Robert didn't come home Tuesday night. I called his cell at 10 p.m. It went straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where are you? Getting worried." No response. I told myself he'd probably gotten delayed, maybe had drinks with clients, maybe his phone died. I went to bed alone, something that wasn't usual but felt different that night. The house was too quiet. The wedding ring still sat on his nightstand, a small gold circle of abandonment. Wednesday morning, no Robert. No calls, no texts. I called his office. His assistant, a chirpy young woman named Melissa, who always sounded like she was smiling even on the phone, said brightly, "Oh, Mr. Hartley is out of town this week. Didn't he tell you? He's at the Dallas conference until Friday." "Dallas," I repeated numbly. "Right, the leadership summit thing. He left Monday night, I think. He should be back in the office next Monday." I thanked her and hung up. Dallas, a conference he'd never mentioned, that he'd supposedly left for Monday night, which meant he'd lied to me Tuesday morning at breakfast, had come home Monday, packed a bag I never saw, left for an airport at some point, all without saying a word. Or, and this possibility made my hands shake as I stood in our kitchen staring at his abandoned coffee cup, Melissa was covering for him, lying because he'd told her to, because wherever Robert actually was, it wasn't Dallas, and it wasn't anywhere he wanted me to know about. I spent Wednesdays searching. I went through his home office, feeling like a criminal, like I was violating some sacred trust, even though he'd already violated whatever trust we'd had by disappearing without explanation. His desk was neat as always, organized to the point of obsessiveness. Files for clients, tax documents, investment statements. Nothing suspicious, nothing personal, nothing that explained where he was or why he'd lied. His laptop was password protected with a code I didn't know. His filing cabinets were locked. The man who'd shared my life for 30 decades had apparently been preparing for this moment, had built walls and locks around pieces of himself I'd never known needed protecting. I searched our bedroom next. His dresser drawers revealed nothing except well-organized clothing. His closet showed no obvious missing items except his travel bag and presumably whatever he'd packed. The wedding ring still sat on the nightstand, mocking me. Then I checked the bathroom. In the cabinet under his sink, behind the cleaning supplies and extra towels, I found a small leather toiletry bag I didn't recognize. Inside, cologne, the new scent I'd noticed, condoms, we hadn't used those in 20 years, breath mints, a hotel key card with no hotel name visible. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped everything. Condoms, a hotel key card, the physical evidence of what I'd been trying not to believe for months. My husband was having an affair, and wherever he'd disappeared to, it wasn't Dallas and it wasn't business. Thursday, I called the police. I explained that my husband had been missing for 2 days, that his office said he was at a conference, but I had evidence he might not be telling the truth, that I was worried something had happened. The officer who took my call was patient but dismissive. "Mrs. Hartley, has your husband given you any reason to believe he might be in danger? Has he been threatened? Are there signs of a struggle?" "No, but has he accessed your bank accounts or credit cards since Tuesday?" I hadn't checked. I pulled up our banking app while we talked, something I rarely did because Robert handled all our finances. There had been charges. One at a gas station in New Jersey on Tuesday afternoon, one at a restaurant I didn't recognize in Pennsylvania Tuesday evening, another gas station charge in Virginia Wednesday morning, and then, Wednesday afternoon, a hotel charge in North Carolina, a hotel called the Magnolia Inn. "He's in North Carolina," I said, reading the screen. "He charged a hotel there yesterday." "So he's traveling and using his credit cards. That suggests he's fine, ma'am. Adults have the right to go wherever they want. If you're concerned about your marriage, that's between you and him, but it's not a police matter unless you have reason to believe he's in danger or being held against his will." I hung up feeling stupid and humiliated. Of course the police weren't interested. This wasn't a crime. This was just an old woman whose husband had gotten tired of her and run off with someone else. Too cowardly to admit it, too selfish to end things honestly. But something still didn't sit right. Yes, Robert was probably having an affair. Yes, he'd probably planned some romantic getaway with his mistress. But why the elaborate lie? Why not just tell me he had a business trip? Why disappear without any communication, leaving me worried and confused? That wasn't like Robert. For all his faults, his emotional distance, his workaholic tendencies, his seeming inability to see me as anything other than the person who managed his household, he wasn't cruel. He wouldn't deliberately cause me anxiety, would he? Thursday afternoon, I drove to the Magnolia Inn. It took me 5 hours, following GPS through states I'd never driven through alone, my hands tight on the wheel, my mind racing through scenarios of what I'd find when I got there. Robert with another woman, Robert with another man, Robert with multiple people in some elaborate double life I'd been too naive to imagine. The Magnolia Inn turned out to be a small bed and breakfast on a quiet street in Asheville, North Carolina. One of those places that tries very hard to be charming, with rocking chairs on the front porch and a hand-painted sign featuring magnolia flowers. I sat in my car across the street for 30 minutes, working up courage, before finally walking to the front door. A woman in her 50s answered my knock, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for my husband," I said, and heard how pathetic that sounded. "Robert Hartley. He checked in yesterday. I think I'm Eleanor, his wife." Her expression shifted. Surprise, then something that looked like sympathy. "Oh, Mrs. Hartley. Yes, your husband is here. Room 4, upstairs, second door on the left. But," she paused, clearly uncomfortable, "maybe I should call him down instead?" "No," I said firmly. "I'll go up. Thank you." I climbed the stairs with legs that felt like they might give out. The hallway was narrow, wallpapered in faded roses, smelling like potpourri and old wood. Room 4 sat at the end. I stood outside for a long moment, listening for voices, for sounds of intimacy, for proof of what I already knew. Silence. I knocked. "Robert, it's Eleanor." More silence. Then shuffling sounds. The lock clicking. The door opening. Robert stood there in a t-shirt and sweatpants I didn't recognize, his hair uncombed, his face unshaven, looking smaller somehow, diminished. His eyes went wide when he saw me. Not guilty, not angry, afraid. "Eleanor," he said, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? Robert, you've been gone for 3 days. No calls, no texts, nothing. Your office said you were in Dallas. You charged this hotel to our credit card. What the hell is going on?" He stepped back, letting me into the room. It was small, neat, with a double bed that looked untouched, a small table by the window, and a bathroom visible through an open door. No signs of another person, no extra clothes, no toiletries that weren't his, no evidence of the affair I'd been so certain I'd find. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I needed—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I can't explain." "Try," I said. He sat on the edge of the bed, looked at his hands. "I've been coming here for 6 months, once a month, for 3 or 4 days each time. I told work I was doing remote consulting. I told you I was traveling for business. I needed to be away." "Away from what? Me?" "From everything. From our life. From who I'm supposed to be." I felt something crack inside me. "Are you having an affair?" "No." He looked up, met my eyes. "God, no. Eleanor, I'm not. This isn't about someone else." "Then what is it about?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear, "I'm trying to figure out who I am. Who I am without the business, without the performance, without being the man everyone expects me to be. And I needed space to do that. I know that's selfish. I know I hurt you. But I didn't know how else to do this." "So you just disappeared? You let me worry? Let me think you were dead or hurt or—" I stopped, too angry to continue. "I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Robert." We stared at each other across the small room, 32 years of marriage suddenly feeling like 32 years of living with a stranger. "Come home," I finally said. "Come home and we'll talk about this. Whatever you're going through, we'll figure it out. But you can't just run away. That's not how marriage works." "I know," he said, but something in his eyes told me he didn't want to come home, that whatever he'd found in this small room in this small town, it was something our life together couldn't accommodate. "Robert," I said slowly, a terrible understanding beginning to dawn, "are you leaving me?" He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I understood that I'd already lost him. Not to another woman, not to an affair, but to whatever secret life he'd been building in these monthly disappearances, these days spent becoming someone I'd never met. "I don't know," he finally said. "I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it hasn't been fine for years." I left, walked out of that room, down those stairs, past the sympathetic innkeeper, into my car. I drove 3 hours before I had to pull over because I was crying so hard. I sat in a rest stop parking lot and let myself fall apart completely. Not just about the disappearance, but about all of it. The years of emotional distance, the slow death of intimacy, the way we'd become roommates performing the role of spouses, the fact that my husband had been so unhappy he'd created an entirely separate existence just to escape me. When I finally got home Friday evening, I walked into our kitchen and saw that coffee cup still sitting there, and I knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning of understanding how completely I'd been living a lie. Because what I didn't know yet, what Robert hadn't told me, what I'd discover in the weeks that followed, was that the Magnolia Inn was only part of the truth, that his 3-day disappearance wasn't about finding himself at all. It was about covering up what he'd been doing for the past 6 months. And when I finally uncovered the whole truth, I realized that the man I'd married, the life I'd built, the 32 years I'd invested, all of it had been built on lies so profound that there was no coming back from them. But that discovery would come later. First, I had to decide, did I want to know the truth? Or did I want to keep living in the comfortable fiction that at least Robert's midlife crisis was benign, that he was just confused and lost rather than deliberately cruel? I chose truth. And truth, as it turns out, doesn't set you free. It just shows you exactly how trapped you've always been. The weekend passed in a strange suspension of reality. Robert came home Saturday morning, driving his BMW into our driveway like he'd just been out for groceries, instead of disappeared for 3 days while I unraveled. He brought his small travel bag inside, unpacked methodically, everything folded, everything in its place, and then stood in our bedroom doorway as if waiting for permission to enter. "Eleanor," he began, but I held up my hand. "Not yet," I said. "I need time." He nodded, accepting this the way he accepted everything, with that passive compliance that I'd once mistaken her agreeableness, but now recognized as avoidance. He moved through our house like a guest, polite and careful, giving me space I hadn't asked for but apparently needed. Sunday, I made breakfast. We ate in silence. He read the paper. I watched him read, searching his face for signs of the man I thought I'd married, finding only this stranger who wore Robert's features but seemed hollowed out, like a sculpture of my husband rather than the actual person. "I need to understand," I finally said. "If this wasn't an affair, if you were just, having an existential crisis? Why the secrecy? Why lie about Dallas? Why disappear without a word?" Robert set down the paper, folded it with his usual precision. "Because I knew if I told you the truth, you'd want to fix it. You'd want to talk it through, make a plan, solve the problem, and I didn't want it solved. I just wanted space. Space to think," I repeated, "for 3 days while I imagined you dead in a ditch somewhere? I'm sorry." "Stop saying you're sorry. Sorry is what you say when you accidentally bump into someone. You deliberately let me believe you might be dead or hurt. That's not an accident. That's cruelty." Something flickered across his face. Maybe guilt, maybe defensiveness. I couldn't tell anymore. "You're right," he said. "I handled this badly. I'll do better." But "I'll do better" felt like all his other promises over the years. Earnest in the moment, forgotten by next week. I wanted to believe him. 32 years of marriage, of history, of shared life. You don't walk away from that easily. But I also felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Doubt. Deep, corrosive doubt about whether this marriage was worth saving, whether this man sitting across from me was someone I even knew. "I'm going to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to tell me the truth. No evasions, no half answers. Just the truth." He nodded. "Have you been to the Magnolia Inn before last week?" A pause. Too long. "Yes." "How many times?" "Once a month, for the past 6 months. So that's 6 trips, 3 or 4 days each time. That's 18 to 24 days you've spent there. What were you doing?" "Nothing. Reading, walking, thinking, just being alone. For 6 months, you've been lying to me, to your office, spending days in a hotel room doing nothing? When you say it like that, how else should I say it, Robert? Because from where I'm sitting, this sounds like either the world's longest midlife crisis or a cover story for something you don't want to tell me. It's not a cover story. Then prove it. Show me your phone, your laptop, your credit card statements. If you've really been doing nothing except thinking, show me." His expression closed off. "I don't think that's—" "Show me, Robert, or I'm done. Right now. I'll call a lawyer Monday morning and file for divorce, and you can spend as much time alone thinking as you want." We stared at each other across the breakfast table, and I saw the moment he calculated. Whether I was bluffing, whether he could deflect, whether he could maintain this wall of privacy he'd built around whatever secret he was living. "Okay," he finally said. "Okay." He went upstairs, came back with his laptop and phone, set them both on the table, unlocked them both, and then sat there, watching me, as I began scrolling through the digital record of the man I'd married. His email first. Work correspondence, mostly boring. Client meetings, project updates, the usual business communications. Nothing suspicious until I searched for Magnolia Inn and found hotel confirmation emails going back 6 months, just as he'd said. 1 weekend a month, checking in on a Thursday or Friday, checking out on a Sunday or Monday. But then I noticed something. In several of the emails confirming his reservations, there was a note in the special requests field. It said, Room 4, same as last time. She prefers that room. She. My blood went cold. Robert, who is she? He'd gone very still. What? I turned the laptop so he could see. The reservation emails. They mention she prefers that room. Who is she? That must be a mistake. An autocorrect or... Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything. Who is she? He opened his mouth, closed it again, opened it again, and then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear. My sister. I blinked. Your sister? Robert, you don't have a sister. I do. Did. He stopped, took a breath. Her name was Caroline. She died when I was 17, before I met you. You never mentioned a sister. I know. Why? Because I couldn't. Because talking about her meant talking about how she died. And I couldn't. I still can't. His voice broke. I stared at him, trying to process this information. In 32 years of marriage, through endless conversations about family and childhood and history, Robert had never once mentioned having a sister, had actively presented himself as an only child, had lied by omission for decades about this fundamental fact of his life. How did she die? I asked carefully. Caroline died. She was 16. I was driving. Oh no. It wasn't your fault, I said, because what else do you say? It was completely my fault. I was speeding, showing off for my friends. The car slid on wet pavement, went into a tree. Caroline died at the scene. I walked away with a broken arm, and I've spent 46 years trying to figure out how to live with that. And the Magnolia Inn was Caroline's favorite place. Our parents took us there every summer when we were kids. She loved that place, loved room 4 because it had a window seat where she could read. When I started feeling like I was drowning in my own life, like I couldn't breathe in my own skin, I thought, maybe if I went back there, maybe if I spent time in the place where she was happiest, I could, I don't know, feel closer to her, understand what I was supposed to do with this life I got to keep living when hers was cut short. I sat with this information, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from me with the story he just told. You've been going there to grieve your sister. I've been going there to remember her, to remember who I was before I became this person, this successful businessman, this husband, this father, all these roles I play but don't feel. Caroline knew me when I was just Bobby, before the accident, before I learned to wall everything off and pretend to be fine. Why didn't you tell me? In 32 years, why didn't you ever mention her? Because telling you would mean explaining how she died. And explaining how she died would mean admitting what I did. And I was terrified. He stopped, struggled to continue. I was terrified that if you knew, you'd see me differently. You'd see that I'm the kind of person who kills people they love through carelessness. And you wouldn't. You'd leave. Or you'd stay, but look at me the way my parents did. Like a murderer they had to keep pretending to love. Your parents blamed you. Not in words, but in every look, every silence, every way they pulled back from me after she died. We never talked about Caroline. We never acknowledged her birthday or the anniversary of her death. We just pretended she'd never existed. And I was an only child, and everything was fine. And I've been doing the same thing ever since. I reached across the table, took his hand. It was the first time I'd voluntarily touched him in days. Robert, you should have told me. I wouldn't have left. I wouldn't have judged you. But hiding this, creating this secret life, that's what's breaking us. Not the accident, not your grief. The fact that you thought you had to hide it from me. I know, he whispered. I know. We sat there holding hands across the breakfast table, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. And underneath the anger and hurt of the past few days, a recognition that this man I'd married had been carrying a burden so heavy it had shaped every part of him, and I'd never even noticed. But something still bothered me. Something didn't quite fit. Robert, I said, if you were going to the Magnolia Inn to grieve and think and remember Caroline, Why the hotel key card in the bathroom? Why the condoms? He pulled his hand back, looked away. What? I found them. Thursday, when I was searching for clues about where you'd gone. A toiletry bag with cologne, breath mints, condoms, and a hotel key card. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Not after everything you just told me. I found them in the bathroom cabinet, behind the cleaning supplies. Eleanor, I have no idea what bag you're talking about. I haven't used condoms in decades. Why would I? We stared at each other, and I saw it in his eyes. Genuine confusion. He didn't know about the toiletry bag, which meant either he was an incredible liar or it wasn't his. Show me, Robert said, standing abruptly. Show me this bag. We went upstairs together. I pulled the toiletry bag from where I'd found it, set it on the bathroom counter. Robert stared at it like it was a snake. I've never seen this before, he said. Eleanor, I swear to you this isn't mine. Then whose is it? I don't. He stopped, went pale. Connor? Connor? Our son. 29 years old, living in Boston, married for 3 years to a woman named Lisa we saw maybe twice a year. He was here 2 weeks ago, remember? He said he had a work conference in Hartford and stayed here for the weekend instead of getting a hotel. I did remember. Connor had stayed in the guest room, spent most of the visit on his phone or laptop, claimed he had to work on presentations. I thought he seemed distant, but chalked it up to stress. You think this belongs to Connor, I said. You think our son is having an affair. Yes, and he hid the evidence in our bathroom because he knew we'd never look there, knew his mother wouldn't snoop. I felt sick, not just at the implication about Connor, but at what it meant about the past 3 days. I'd found that bag Thursday, immediately jumped to the conclusion it was Robert's, driven to North Carolina in a rage fueled by certainty that my husband was cheating. I'd been so ready to believe the worst about Robert that I hadn't even considered other possibilities. I'm sorry, I said. I thought, when you disappeared and I found that bag, I thought you were having an affair. I thought the trip to Magnolia Inn was about meeting someone. I'm sorry. Robert sat on the edge of the bathtub, holding the toiletry bag like evidence in a trial. Don't apologize. I gave you every reason to think the worst. The secrecy, the lying, the disappearing. Of course you thought I was cheating. I would have thought the same thing. What do we do about Connor? I don't know. Call him? Tell him we found his cheating supplies in our bathroom? Hope he's smart enough to end whatever he's doing before Lisa finds out? I thought about our son, about the sweet boy he'd been, always trying to please everyone, taking on too much responsibility too young because his father was never around and his mother was too busy managing everything. Thought about the man he'd become, serious, driven, climbing corporate ladders with the same intensity Robert had. Thought about Lisa, kind and quiet, who worked as a nurse and seemed to worship Connor. And I thought, this is how it happens. This is how marriages die. Not in dramatic explosions, but in small betrayals, secret lies, lies that accumulate like sediment until the weight of them drowns everything. We should call him, I said, tonight, before this goes any further. So we did. We called Connor together, on speakerphone, sitting in our bedroom. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. Hey, Mom, Dad, what's up? Is everything okay? We need to talk to you about something, I said. About something we found. Found? What? A pause. Then, carefully, what did you find? A toiletry bag in our bathroom with some items that suggest you might be involved in something that could hurt your marriage. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Connor? Robert said. I can explain, Connor said, but his voice had gone thick. I was going to. I didn't mean for. Are you having an affair? I asked bluntly. No, God, no. I love Lisa. I would never. He stopped, started again. The bag, the things in it, they're not for an affair. Then what are they for? Another pause. Then, I've been seeing someone, but not like that. I've been seeing a therapist for sex addiction. The condoms, the hotel key card, those are from before I started treatment, from when I was acting out. I hid them at your house because I was ashamed, and I didn't want Lisa to find them. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sex addiction, Robert repeated carefully. Yeah, I've been struggling for years, using porn, hiring escorts, doing things that would destroy Lisa if she knew. I finally got help 6 months ago. Been working with a therapist, going to meetings, trying to get clean. The stuff in that bag, I forgot I'd hidden it there. I should have thrown it away, but I guess part of me couldn't let go. I'm sorry you found it. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I closed my eyes, processing. Our son, our serious, responsible, successful son, had been struggling with an addiction so severe it required therapy and meetings, and we'd never noticed. Just like I'd never noticed Robert's grief, just like Robert had never noticed my loneliness. We were a family of people living parallel lives in the same house, all suffering silently, all assuming we were alone. Connor, I said gently, does Lisa know? No, and I'm terrified to tell her. She'll leave. I know she'll leave. Maybe, Robert said, but she deserves the truth, and you deserve to stop carrying this secret. Dad, I can't. Yes, you can, because secrets destroy marriages. I know. I've spent our entire marriage hiding things from your mother, and it's nearly cost me everything. Don't make my mistakes. They talked for another hour, Robert and Connor, father and son, two men trying to figure out how to be honest about their brokenness. I listened, saying little, understanding for the first time that Robert's emotional distance wasn't about not caring. It was about caring so much it terrified him. When we finally hung up, Robert and I sat in silence. I'm tired, he said eventually. I'm so tired of pretending everything is fine when nothing is fine. Me too. What do we do now? I don't know. Therapy, probably? For both of us, together and separately. Because we can't keep living like this. We can't keep being strangers who happen to share a house. I don't want to be strangers, Robert said. I want to be your husband. Really be your husband, not just perform the role. Then you need to tell me things, real things, not just logistics and schedules. Your fears, your grief, your secrets, all of it. That terrifies me. I know, me too. But it's the only way forward. We started therapy the following week, found a counselor who specialized in long-term marriages in crisis, spent awkward, painful hours in her office excavating decades of unspoken resentments and buried grief. Robert talked about Caroline, about the accident, about 46 years of guilt he'd never processed. I talked about feeling invisible, about sacrificing my identity to support his career and raise our children, about waking up at 63 and realizing I didn't know who I was anymore. Slowly, very slowly, we began talking to each other instead of past each other. Robert stopped disappearing, physically and emotionally. I stopped pretending I was fine with being ignored. We learned each other's languages again, like immigrants who'd forgotten their native tongue. Connor told Lisa about his addiction. She didn't leave, but they started couples therapy, working through the betrayal and broken trust. Emily, our daughter, called and admitted she'd been struggling with postpartum depression for months and hadn't told us because she didn't want to burden us. Our family, it turned out, was full of people suffering in silence, all assuming everyone else was fine. It's been a year now since Robert disappeared for 3 days. The coffee cup is long gone, washed and put away. The wedding ring is back on his finger. We're not fixed. Maybe we'll never be completely fixed, but we're trying, really trying, not just going through the motions. We went back to the Magnolia Inn together 3 months ago, stayed in room 4. Robert showed me the window seat where Caroline used to read, told me stories about his sister, cried in my arms in ways he'd never allowed himself before. And I met the ghost that had been haunting our marriage for 32 years, acknowledged her, made space for her. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just shows you how trapped you've always been by the lies you tell yourself and each other. But acknowledging the trap is the first step toward escape, or toward building something better inside the space you thought was a cage. Robert's 3-day disappearance taught me something important. People are capable of containing multitudes of pain and secret lives and hidden selves. And unless you ask, and really listen, you'll never know the person sleeping beside you, even after 32 years, even when you think you know everything. And the wedding ring? It stays on his nightstand when he sleeps now. Not because he's abandoning our marriage, but because after his sister died, he developed a strange habit of putting his ring somewhere safe at night, afraid he'd lose it, the way he'd lost her. I never asked why he started doing that. He never explained. We just lived with this small mystery for decades, both assuming we understood what it meant, both wrong. That's what marriage is, I think. A series of mysteries you solve together, or try to, or learn to live with unsolved. And maybe that's enough.